Missing person investigations can often be very intricate, especially when there's a lack of evidence to follow up on. But in some of these cases, plenty of clues are found, such as cell phone or CCTV images of the missing person's last known whereabouts. But despite this, they remain missing and are never located. Sandra Saju, a 22-year-old woman who hails from Edinburgh, the capital of Scotland, has been missing for almost 3 weeks, and investigators have repeatedly appealed to the public for information on her whereabouts. But to date, no one has been able to track her down. She was seen on the 6th of December, 2024, in the South Gale area of Edinburgh, and a CCTV image of Sandra has been made available to the public in case someone spots her. It's also been revealed that there was another sighting of her in the Burnvale area of Livingstone at around 8:30 p.m. on the day that she disappeared. Further investigation into her case identified more witnesses who'd seen Sandra in the Asda store in Almondvale, also in Livingston, sometime between 9:10 and 9:45 p.m. That was the last time anybody saw her, and her family is growing ever more concerned for her well-being. It's also been revealed by investigators that Sandra traveled to a house in Burnvale at some point, where she picked up one black bag and a white shopping bag. It's never been revealed whether investigators know what was in the bags or who she picked them up from. But when she was seen in a supermarket later on, she no longer had the bags with her, suggesting that she either dropped them off somewhere or left them somewhere for later retrieval, though this is just speculation at this point. Her family has stated that they're desperate to find any information on where she went, since they're worried she may have been hurt or worse. They've asked the public to be on the lookout for her and the black bag that she was carrying, which according to the police is very distinctive. They added that her disappearance is very out of character for her, since she usually remains in touch with friends and loved ones, but since she disappeared, she's not been in touch with anyone. Investigators were told that she often wears a black face mask and gray earmuffs when it's cold. In the CCTV image, she has the mask over her mouth and nose, but it isn't clear whether she's wearing the earmuffs since she has a hood over her head. CCTV of the areas where she was spotted is continually being reviewed, but has not offered up any clues so far. The police say that they've carried out extensive inquiries into the case and will continue to do so until Sandra's case is solved. Her family has made a direct appeal to Sandra, stating that if she saw any of their messages, to just get in touch with them so they can at least know that she's safe. They've also released a description of her. The last time Sandra was seen, she was wearing a gray jacket and a fur-lined hood. She's described as being of Indian ethnicity, with a slim build and short black hair. She stands 5 foot 6 inches tall and was seen carrying the aforementioned black backpack. If you or anyone you know has seen Sandra or has any information on where she may be, you're asked to contact Police Scotland by dialing 101 and quoting incident number 3390. The disappearance of 35-year-old Charlene Hobbs occurred on the 24th of July, 2024, and investigators have stated that there are several possible explanations for her going missing, but none have been confirmed as of yet. Charlene vanished from Riversdale in Cardiff, Wales, and was quickly reported missing by her family. The resulting investigation included searches of several different houses, derelict buildings, outdoor areas, and vehicles, but to no avail. They've also released some strange details about their investigation, including the fact that they came across a burnt-out Nissan Micra that was originally red but had been repainted black. It's not been made clear whether this car belonged to Charlene, but it is an aspect of the case that's being investigated further, and it's been revealed that it was found in St. Helens, close to Abergavenny. While their involvement in Charlene's disappearance isn't clear, it's known that 2 men, aged 43 and 45 respectively, and a 38-year-old woman were taken into custody in connection to the case, but they've since been granted bail and their identities have not been made public. Charlene was captured by CCTV security cameras at a Morrison's supermarket in Moira Place, Adamstown, and an image from the footage was made public, but it didn't produce any further leads. Another photo then emerged a few days later. Taken with someone's cell phone, it shows Charlene wearing the same strapless top with her hair up in a bun, just as she had appeared in the footage from Morrison's. The photo was taken in Broadway at Adamstown on the 24th of July 2024 at 6:07 a.m., but again, no one came forward to say that they saw her after the photo was taken. Sources have not revealed whether the phone belongs to Charlene or someone else. The authorities have also stated that the cell phone was analyzed for additional clues, and it then came to light that Charlene had placed several calls and sent text messages to people she knew, possibly to meet up with them, but it isn't known whether she actually spoke to anyone, and if so, whether she revealed where she was at the time. Investigators assured her family and members of the public that they will continue to investigate the case, and added that they would begin going from house to house to look for any relevant information. They'll also be speaking with her friends and family, as well as searching through CCTV security footage in the areas where she was last seen. But they have, however, also stated that they're keeping an open mind during their inquiries, since it isn't known whether Charlene disappeared willingly, or whether there are more nefarious details that have not come to light yet. They've asked anyone who spoke to her on the phone that day, or who met up with her, to contact them immediately, since this could further add to the timeline of her last known movements. Charlene's family has also reached out to the public, stating that they're growing increasingly worried about her and asking that they call the police if they spot her. A detailed description has not been released, but she was last seen wearing a black strapless top and has a distinctive tattoo of a dragon between her shoulder blades. If you've seen Charlene or have any information on her movements or where she may be, you can submit a tip by calling Crime Stoppers at 0800-555-111. The family of 77-year-old Graham Russell Smith, who lives on North Island, New Zealand, is growing ever more concerned for his well-being, since he's been missing for nearly 2 months, and despite images of his last known whereabouts being made public, he's still not been located. On the 10th of November, 2024, Graham decided to go for a walk on the Colonial Knob Walkway's Doctor Track, an area that's popular amongst hikers and mountain bikers, and which has several trails leading through the area. One would imagine then that someone would have seen Graham while he was out on his walk, but no one has come forward with any such information, and at present it isn't known whether he stayed on his intended trail or decided to walk along a different one. After he was reported as missing, a search effort was immediately organized, and search and rescue personnel started combing the area for any sign of the missing man, but to no avail. The first session of searches lasted throughout that weekend, and hopes were high that Graham would be found, but unfortunately this wasn't the case. As time went by without any positive result, investigators turned to the public and requested that anyone who was in the area that day contact them, since they may have some information that could help track Graham down. They added that even if they didn't see Graham while they were out on the trails, their whereabouts from 4 p.m. onwards could still be helpful, since those areas could be ruled out during searches. They also requested that local residents check their backyards, sheds, work sites, and garages, since he may have taken shelter there at some point. Graham is known to possibly suffer from dementia, which may have caused him to become confused, and he may have been forced to find a place in which he could bunker down. In the meantime, the search for Graham continued and lasted for hundreds of hours with the aid of helicopters, drones, field teams, and search dogs from agencies such as Landsar, Amateur Radio Emergency Communications, Lifelight Trust, the City Council, and Department of Conservation, and Fire and Emergency New Zealand. But despite their best efforts, no further clues were found. A new image taken by a CCTV camera was made available to the public in case someone recognized him, since it showed the clothing that he was last known to be wearing. But again, no one came forward to state that they had seen him or interacted with him on the day that he went missing, or the days following that. Usually, in these types of cases, some of the missing person's clothing, equipment, or other belongings is eventually found. But in Graham's disappearance, this simply isn't the case. No one knows whether he made it to the trail that day, or whether he went missing in another area, making the search that much harder. If you spot Graham or have any new details on his case, you're asked to contact the authorities by dialing 111, quoting case number 241111/3559. The search for 27-year-old Jack McLennan, who disappeared while out on a camping trip with one of his friends, has unfortunately been scaled down after efforts to locate him were unsuccessful. Jack, who lives on Australia's Sunshine Coast, was last seen on the 4th of October 2024 in an area known as Fix Crossing, a popular fishing spot that's situated close to Murgon in Queensland. Jack, who works as a personal trainer in Kingaroy, told his family about his plans before setting out on a boys' fishing trip that day, and stated that he'd be back later that afternoon. But when he hadn't come back home by the following day, his family started to worry, and they contacted the police to file a missing person report. It would later be reported that they'd reached Fix Crossing, where they enjoyed a few drinks and made use of a swing that was suspended over the water. His mother, who's been left devastated by Jack's disappearance, added that they were just having some fun, but then Jack suddenly went missing. Rescue teams were deployed to the area. Police officers, state emergency service volunteers, and specialist teams traveled to the area and started scouring the spots where Jack was known to have been that day, but they failed to locate him. Eventually, the search stretched into 2 weeks, and when it seemed that it was a lost cause, they finally found their first clue. Jack's hat and his shoes were found near the fishing spot, but they didn't provide searchers with any further clues, other than the fact that he was definitely in that specific spot at some point. A photo taken from CCTV security footage at a liquor store in Murgon was then released to the public. It showed Jack in the clothing that he was wearing when he left for the trip, and he seemed to be in good spirits, as it showed him giving a store employee a thumbs up. Since Jack remains missing more than a month after he disappeared, despite some of his belongings being found, his family started to suspect that he may have been the victim of foul play. His girlfriend, Carly Beetham, told the media that it's very out of character for Jack to just vanish like this, since he isn't prone to getting lost. She added that he's a very intelligent person who knows his way around, and hence she and his family are starting to suspect the worst, that he came into contact with someone who had nefarious intentions, and that they may have harmed him. They're also certain that someone in the area must have seen or heard something that day, but they simply failed to come forward for reasons unknown. The friend who he was with that day has been fully cooperative with the police, but has been unable to add any useful information. After the search was scaled down, homicide detectives joined the case and are currently investigating his case. His family was told that Jack may have been seen walking towards Wandai, but this was never fully confirmed. Unfortunately, his family is not happy with the way the case has been handled by the police. They've told media outlets that the search was only started a few days after they reported Jack missing, and when it was eventually called off, they received no further information. Investigators have refuted this claim, stating that they've been in constant contact with Jack's loved ones, and adding that they'll keep the investigation going. They've asked that a person who was seen camping in the area come forward, but they haven't revealed whether this has happened yet. It should be noted that Jack told his mother, Kelly, that he hit his head at some point. She offered to pick him up, but he declined, and it's possible this may have had something to do with his disappearance. If you've seen Jack since he went missing, you're asked to contact your local police immediately. 59-year-old Albert Calabet is a former Los Angeles Sheriff's deputy who's been missing since the 11th of June 2024, and his family has expressed their frustrations with the search efforts undertaken by Greek and U.S. authorities. At the time of his disappearance, Albert was on vacation on the Greek island of Amorgos with a friend, and he decided to go for a hike on what locals describe as a challenging trail. He told his friends that he would be back for lunch that afternoon, but he failed to return and has not been seen or heard from since. His friend then traveled to the Amorgos police station where they filed a missing person report, adding that Albert had his cell phone with him, making his disappearance all the more baffling. Calls and messages to his phone have gone unanswered, but it's known that he started his walk from an area called Agelai, and that he was following a path that was clearly marked. He intended to walk to Catapala Amorgos and should have completed the hike in about 4 hours, but he never made it there. When he still hadn't arrived by 3:20 p.m., his friend started to worry and repeatedly called his number but got no answer. When he was reported missing, it was made clear that he had 2 phones with him, one with a US number and another with a French number. Albert's sister has since revealed that she last had contact with him while he was on his walk and showed the police a photo he had sent her from one of the trail signs. A search was quickly organized with the help of firefighters and search volunteers, and while this was happening, a request was sent to the authorities to trace Albert's phones. A few hikers came forward to report that they'd seen Albert on the trail at about 11 a.m., 4 hours into his hike. He was seen around the same time by a woman who runs a refreshment stand when he bought water and a few snacks from her. What makes Albert's disappearance so strange is the fact that he's been on the island many times before and hence knows the area very well. This makes the chances that he got lost very slim and raises a lot of questions. A helicopter and drone were eventually brought in to search from the air, since some areas around the trail contain ravines that are not easily accessible, but it was to no avail. The trail that Albert was walking was searched twice, but no sign of him was found. Some people believe he went off the trail at some point and either got lost or injured. The search radius was then expanded to include off-trail areas, but Albert was still not found. It should be noted that temperatures on the island were climbing into the mid-90s in the days following Albert's disappearance, and he may well have been suffering from dehydration as a result. Search efforts have since ground to a halt without Albert being located, but his family feels that more could have been done. They stated that they encountered several roadblocks during the investigation, including the fact that there was a delay in attempting to track his cell phones and a lack of support from US authorities. Albert's family feels that foul play may be a factor in his case, since not a single clue, such as a piece of clothing or his phone, has been found. Several photos taken of him while on the island have been released in case someone recognizes him, but his case remains unsolved. Anyone who spots Albert or any of his belongings is urged to immediately contact the Hellenic police. 46-year-old Sarah West, who lives in Scarborough, England, has been missing for more than 3 years, and investigators are no closer to solving her case, despite CCTV footage being found of her on the day before she vanished. The last time that Sarah was seen was at about 7:30 a.m. on the 25th of April, 2021. She was seen walking along the A156, which is situated close to Caton Bay. It's been suggested that she then walked along the Cleveland Way path. This has raised some concerns, since the path is close to a set of cliffs, but no evidence has been found that she was in this area, and that theory remains speculative. At the time, investigators asked that any motorists who were traveling in the area that day contact them, in case they had even the smallest bit of information that could help them locate Sarah. But only a few witnesses came forward, and no further helpful information was received. They also asked that people check their dash cams and CCTV cameras in case they caught footage of Sarah before she went missing. A CCTV image was released showing Sarah wearing the same clothes she had on when she disappeared, in hopes that it would jog someone's memory, but to no avail. Search efforts were immediately put in place, with the searches being most heavily concentrated on the coastline as well as the Cleveland Way footpath, but nothing was found. When search efforts failed, her family made a plea for people in the area to keep an eye out for her and to contact the authorities if they spotted her. They also spoke to Sarah during the plea, asking her to come home and reminding her that they loved her no matter what had happened. They added that they were concerned about her health and desperately wanted her to come home so that they could support her. They also mentioned that they would help her find the treatment that she needed, though it isn't clear what this was in reference to. Investigators have launched fresh appeals every year since Sarah went missing, but have received no new leads, and her fate remains unknown. But investigators have assured her family that the case remains open and is still being investigated. Anyone who has any information on Sarah's whereabouts is urged to dial 101, or if you have an immediate sighting, to call emergency services at 999. The disappearance of 41-year-old Mahmoud Ahmad from England is one that has taken many twists and turns, but to date his location remains unknown, and it's believed he may no longer be alive. At the time of his disappearance, Mahmoud was living on Radlett Road in Watford and was working in a kebab shop in Whitechapel called the Lahore Kebab House. He was reported missing when he didn't arrive home after his shift at the kebab restaurant, and an investigation was immediately launched. CCTV images have been made available to the public showing Mahmoud's car, a black Citroen, that he was driving to Watford via Pitfield Street at about 1 p.m. on the day of his disappearance, the 7th of March 2010. They also released CCTV images from the restaurant where he could be seen serving customers, and it was hoped that these images may help someone remember seeing him after he went missing, but this wasn't the case. The case then suddenly took a very unexpected and worrying turn when a security guard in Ilford, Essex, reported seeing a bird drop something from the sky, and when they went to investigate, they were shocked to discover it was a human thumb. It was later determined that the thumb belonged to Mahmoud, and investigators started to fear that he'd been kidnapped sometime after he was last seen by CCTV cameras. More details then started coming to the fore. Mahmoud's sister, Nahid, told the police that she'd left her husband, 33-year-old Mohammed Riaz, in 2008, but he didn't take the news well, and she was forced to flee, after which she went into hiding for fear that he would track her down and harm her. Riaz was tracked down and arrested after it came to light that he and 5 other accomplices followed Mahmoud, after which they abducted him. He was then taken to an apartment in East London where they assaulted him in an effort to find out where Nahid was hiding. Other residents of the apartment building would later come forward to report that they heard a man screaming phrases like "leave me alone" shortly after Mahmoud disappeared. There was now no doubt that Riaz was responsible for Mahmoud's disappearance, but he refused to divulge any further information, such as where Mahmoud could be found. During his and his accomplices' trials, it was revealed that Riaz's marriage to Nahid was more akin to a reign of terror than a marriage, and that she eventually had no choice but to file for divorce since she feared for her own safety. But rather than agreeing to the divorce, Riaz flew into a fit of rage and started searching for Nahid. When he couldn't find her, he decided to take matters into his own hands, and together with his fellow criminals he devised the nefarious plan to abduct Mahmoud. It's now believed that the group ended Mahmoud's life when he refused to divulge his sister's location, and that his remains have been hidden. All 6 of the culprits were tracked down and charged with various crimes. Many questions still remain in this case, since Mahmoud has never been found, and while it's believed that the group ended his life, his fate ultimately remains a mystery. John Johnson, a native of Iceland, went missing in Whitehall, Ireland in February of 2019, and he has still not been found. The resulting investigation has resulted in suggestions that foul play is involved, but several searches failed to find any sign of him. John had traveled to Ireland with his fiancée and booked into a hotel for 10 days, since they planned on attending a poker tournament that was being held there. But just 1 day after they arrived, he mysteriously vanished. Witnesses came forward to report that they'd seen him in the Whitehall area at around 11 a.m. that morning, the 9th of February. But despite the area being searched, he wasn't located. His fiancée would also report that he had thousands of euros on him when he went missing, since he intended to use the money during the poker tournament. This led to speculation that he may have been the victim of a robbery, though it isn't known who would have been aware of the money he was carrying. The police reached out to the public for any information they had, and over the years, they followed up on as many as 270 leads, but were still unable to find John. They also received 2 anonymous letters from someone who claimed to have knowledge of the case. CCTV footage and images of the day of his disappearance were also released. They showed John walking through the lobby of the hotel where he was staying, and then walking down a street where he could be seen lighting a cigarette. He was then tracked walking past several businesses in the area, but his movements after that are unknown. 5 years after his disappearance, the police revealed that they believed John was no longer alive. They speculate that he attended the poker tournament and had a run of bad luck, losing a large sum of money. They think he then contacted someone to get more cash and met up with them, but at some point during the meeting, they got into an argument and an altercation broke out. They added that it's possible his life was ended and that his body was hidden in a park in Santry, North Dublin. All of this information was gleaned from the 2 anonymous letters that were sent to investigators, and a search of the park was undertaken, but failed to provide any further clues. The police appealed to the author of the letters to come forward, but to no avail. John's family aided in the search, but it was eventually called off when all areas of interest had been thoroughly combed through. The police have asked that anyone with information on John's whereabouts or the identity of the author of the letters come forward by contacting the Ballymun Garda station at 01-666-4400. The last time that father of 5, 26-year-old Thomas Roche was seen was on the 6th of October 2024 in Bletchley, Buckinghamshire, England. Witnesses reported seeing him in Chester Close, but he remains missing. It's known that Thomas left his apartment at Chester Close that morning at about 12:30 a.m., stating that he was going out to have a cigarette, but he never returned and he was reported as a missing person. He didn't take his phone with him since he only intended to be gone for a short while, and hence it didn't offer up any clues as to where he was traveling. He also didn't take his phone with him since he only intended to be gone for a short while, and hence it didn't offer up any clues as to which area he was traveling in. He also didn't have any cash, credit cards, or a passport with him. Thomas's family aided in the search for him and is growing increasingly worried about his well-being, though they have stated that they believe he is still alive and may be living on the streets of Bletchley for reasons unknown. It's been noted, though, that he only has the clothes that he left the apartment in that night, and hence he may be battling the elements as temperatures start to drop in the area. As time goes by, they're starting to lose hope that he will be found. But there has been one major clue in the case. DNA was collected from Thomas's toothbrush in case further clues were found, and at some point this paid off. A Monster energy drink was found discarded in some bushes about a mile from his apartment, and when it was sent to be analyzed, it was found to be an exact match for Thomas's DNA. Hence, investigators have asked that if any similar items, such as coffee cups or drink cans, were found in areas where Thomas may have taken shelter from the elements, such as a shed or a garage, that they be handed over to the police for processing. The can gave investigators some idea of the direction that Thomas was traveling in after he disappeared. He's thought to have walked along Wessel Lane and may possibly have traveled along Standing Way, which eventually leads to Bedford and Buckingham. It's been speculated that he got a ride with a truck driver, and an appeal has been made to any driver who either picked Thomas up or who saw him in the days after he went missing. They've also asked cashiers in the area to come forward if they remember selling the Monster energy drink to him. Another detail that's been taken into consideration is the fact that Thomas was hit by a car while he was riding his bike near Chepstow Drive. He suffered an injury to the head, and a passing council worker called the police to aid him. But when they arrived at the scene, Thomas was gone. They went to his mother's house to look for him, but she hadn't seen him, and said that she would contact them if she heard from him. It was about 19 hours later when he was found wandering around in a field. When he was approached, he stated he had no idea he'd been gone for that long, and he was taken to a nearby hospital where he received treatment, including an ECG scan, but he was sent back home 2 hours later. His girlfriend stated that he seemed somewhat confused at first, but the next day he spent time with his family, and they didn't notice anything strange about his behavior. It's been speculated that he's still suffering from the injury and may be disoriented, unable to find his way home. If you've seen Thomas or know where he is, you're asked to contact the police on 999, quoting reference number 432-404-80455. 31-year-old Ricky Harris has been missing for more than a year, but his family has refused to give up hope that he'll be found and kept searching for him since his strange disappearance on the 18th of November, 2023. On that day, Ricky was visiting a friend in Aberdare, Wales, and he then asked his aunt, Nina Harris, if she could give him a ride home, to which she agreed. She picked him up and drove him to his apartment where she dropped him off. She would later tell investigators that she found it strange that he asked her for a ride, since the walk from his friend's house would have only taken about 5 minutes to complete. But during the short ride, he seemed his usual self, and nothing about his behavior stood out in any way. What happened to Ricky after he arrived at his apartment remains unknown, though CCTV footage has been released showing the missing man outside his building at around 2:20 p.m., just before he disappeared. Ricky's family reported him as missing when they were unable to contact him, but the resulting investigation has resulted in somewhat of a nightmare. Nina revealed that the family set up a Facebook account where people can read about the case and submit any information, but it's led to some questionable responses. A number included on the page has received several calls from people who attempt to intimidate them. In other instances, they call the number but then hang up as soon as the call is answered. Someone on Facebook has also messaged the page, stating that Ricky is buried in a shallow grave somewhere, but this is believed to be a hoax played by someone with a sick sense of humor and who has no regard for what Ricky's family is going through. None of the calls or messages can be traced, since the Facebook account has been confirmed as fake, and the numbers from the calls are always withheld. Nina says she's having a tough time coming to terms with the fact that she was the last one to see him. She's since reviewed the CCTV footage several times and is convinced that when he walked away from her car, he was looking nervous for some reason unknown. In retrospect, she thinks he was looking around the parking lot as if looking for someone who was following him. She doesn't blame herself though, since she believes he would have told her if anything was wrong, or if he was in some kind of trouble. His family is increasingly concerned that he was a victim of foul play, though they've not found any evidence to prove this. Searches of several areas have been fruitless, and investigators have asked that anyone with information on Ricky's whereabouts contact Crime Stoppers at 0800-555-111. When this photo of Aileen Faye Williams was taken, her family never imagined it would be one of the last pictures of her before she vanished into thin air. It was August 6, 1962, in Beach Point, Prince Edward Island. Aileen was 19 years old and the youngest of 7 children. She had grown up in Beach Point, but 2 years before her mysterious disappearance, she moved to Ontario. There, she lived with her sister and 2 nieces. She worked as a secretary at a law firm. Aileen was happy with her life in Ontario, but was very close with the rest of her family. She would return back to Beach Point every summer to spend time with her family and catch up with old friends. It was on this trip in 1962 that she became a missing person. Not long after this final photo was captured, Aileen vanished without a trace. On August 6th, her sister-in-law drove her to the nearby town of Montague. She was going to run some errands and meet up with friends. Aileen had already told her family that she would probably be staying with a female friend that night. It wasn't worrying then that Aileen didn't return home that night. It was only when another night passed that her parents thought there was something wrong. They contacted the police and reported her as a missing person. The last known sighting of Aileen was at 7 p.m. that night. An RCMP officer in a police car passed her as he was walking along a road between Montague and Beach Point. Police believe she intended to attend a party that night and may have been trying to hitchhike. There was heavy rain shortly after Aileen disappeared, which may have washed away clues that could solve this missing person case. Searches of the nearby area took place in the following weeks, including in the swampy area outside of Montague. They turned up no trace of Aileen. 60 years later, her family still has no idea what happened to her. It seems unlikely that she intentionally disappeared. As well as being close to her family, she left behind $300 in her bank account, which was never touched. Her family has continued to appeal for information. There have been tips in the unsolved case as recently as 2020, but none have worked out. Anyone with information on this mysterious case can contact the PEI RCMP Major Crime Unit at 907-566-7112. Guma Aguirre was a larger-than-life character and surrounded in controversy when he vanished without a trace off the coast of Florida in 2012. The final photo of the missing millionaire was taken by a security camera as he left Port Everglades on his yacht, never to be seen again. Aguirre made his millions in natural gas after a company set up by his uncle was bought for billions of dollars. Aguirre had a 10% stake in the company and earned $255 million from the sale. He spent his money generously, especially in Israel. Aguirre had converted to Judaism soon before he began making his millions. The rabbi that helped guide him described a man that would get frustrated when he couldn't help people, and who would go out at midnight to feed the homeless. It was in part this desire to help people that began to cause a rift between himself and his uncle. His uncle used his money to set up a conservation charity supporting big cats. Aguirre saw it as a waste of money when there were people in need. Other arguments surrounded Aguirre's claims that he didn't get a fair share and accusing the other of misspending money. As Aguirre and his uncle threw lawsuits at one another, Aguirre's mental health took a turn for the worse. He suffered from bipolar disorder and psychosis. He believed his uncle had sent someone to take his life and was extremely paranoid. His family had him institutionalized in 2010 after he claimed to have gone on a one-man rescue mission to save a soldier being held prisoner in Gaza. By 2012, the time of his mysterious disappearance, his relationship with his wife, Jamie, the mother of his 4 children, had also broken down. On the night he vanished into thin air, he had another argument with her, according to Aguirre's mother. He was seen on his home security camera pacing outside before taking a quick phone call and leaving. He went to the port and took his boat out. The last photo of Aguirre shows him heading out to sea in stormy conditions. There doesn't seem to be anybody else aboard. The last sighting before he vanished was at around sunset. Just after midnight, the boat drifted ashore near a bar on Fort Lauderdale Beach. The keys were still in the ignition, but some equipment had malfunctioned. Found aboard were Aguirre's phone, wallet, flip-flops, and t-shirt. Strangely, investigators also found a Jewish tefillin, a collection of scrolls meant to be worn close to the body during morning prayer. Why Aguirre took these with him remains another unsolved mystery. A search of the coast produced no sign of Aguirre. He's been legally declared as having passed in an accident, but it hasn't stopped theories that he disappeared to avoid lawsuits, or that something more sinister happened. Catherine Louise Adams was last seen alive at a Quick Stop convenience store on the morning of April 29, 1993. She had stopped in for a coffee and newspaper, as was her routine. As she left the store, she was caught on camera, and the last photo before she disappeared was taken. It wouldn't be until the following day that Catherine was reported as a missing person. She lived with her teenage daughter, who called the police when she hadn't heard from her mother in over a day. Catherine was a delivery woman, delivering Legs hosiery and living in Salina, Kansas. On the morning of her mysterious disappearance, she left her home in her white Legs delivery van. It was relatively well recognized in the local area, where Catherine was known to some as the Legs Lady. The word "she has legs" were written on the side of the van. As normal, she visited the convenience store before heading to the storage unit, where she kept the merchandise. It was here that the police found the first sign of Catherine. Her unit door was unlocked, and there was a large amount of blood both inside and outside. Later reports suggested police investigating this unsolved case also located bullet fragments and found evidence that someone had tried to clean up the unit. Catherine's van wasn't at the storage unit. The police located it that afternoon. It was parked outside a restaurant on Western Boulevard. The restaurant was closed for refurbishment at the time, and more clues were discovered in the van. It was covered in mud, and there were about 60 miles on it that could not be accounted for. None of the clues led to Catherine, though. Police believe she's no longer alive, though some sites still list her as a missing person. No suspects were ever named in the investigation, though police did look into a number of people. If alive, Catherine would be 60 years old today. Anyone with information on this case can contact Salina Police Department at 785-826-7210. According to NamUs, there are about 175 unsolved missing person cases in Massachusetts. Carol Louise Rodriguez is one of the oldest of those cases. Unfortunately, like so many missing person cases, there's little information about Carol's mysterious disappearance. One thing we do have is the last photo taken of Carol on the day of her disappearance. It was August 4th, 1973, a Friday. There was rain expected late in the day, but for the most part, the weather was warm and dry. The perfect day for a wedding. The last photo ever taken of Carol before she vanished was at a wedding. She was wearing a purple long-sleeved mini dress with a gathered waist and Chinese pagodas printed on it. In the photo, she looks happy and at ease. She stands beside an older gentleman who has his arm on the waist of another woman. Within hours, Carol had vanished without a trace. In the mid-afternoon, Carol left the wedding. She got a lift heading towards her home in Framingham, Massachusetts. At some point during the journey, she got into an argument with the driver of the car and demanded to be let out. The last confirmed sighting of Carol was at Cumberland Farms, a grocery store across the town hall square. She called her roommate from a payphone to say that she was hitchhiking and had gotten a lift with a person in a beige sedan. She expected to be home by 7 p.m. The exact timeline in this missing person case isn't clear. It seems possible the beige sedan had picked Carol up earlier and stopped to let her make the phone call. Alternatively, Carol might have known the person who was picking her up and wasn't hitchhiking. What we do know is Carol didn't arrive home and hasn't been seen or heard from since. The most obvious explanation is foul play. There are many disturbing individuals who prey on hitchhikers, especially women. If this is the case though, it seems odd that the person allowed Carol to make a call home. Alternatively, the mysterious disappearance may be the result of a tragic accident. The journey from Spencer to Framingham would have passed many waterways. It also started raining after 6 p.m., which could have helped an accident happen. Massachusetts State Police are the investigating agency in this case and can be contacted at 508-832-9124. The disappearance of Kazimierza Zaremba is an extremely sad and disturbing missing person case. Kazimiera was 79 years old when she vanished without a trace in 2012. The last photo of Kazimiera was from a security camera in Lithuania, wandering around a car park where she had been abandoned. Before her mysterious disappearance, Kazimiera lived in Poland. She was a devout Catholic and went to church every day. She had a family of her own, including a daughter, but she treated the vicar, Father Kotas, like a son. He was even invited to family meals. Kazimiera felt safe with Kotas and had no fears when she decided to go on a pilgrimage with her church group. The trip would take the practitioners to Vilnius, Lithuania. The church's name translates to the Chapel of the Gate of Dawn and is popular with religious tourists, especially those from Poland. It would take 2 days for the group to reach Vilnius. During that time, Kazimiera began acting strangely and allegedly talked about going home early. She decided against it though and continued to the church. It was September 29th when Kazimiera was last seen by her church group. The group was attending Mass when Kazimiera left to use the bathroom. When the service was over, Kazimiera was nowhere to be found. Father Kotas tried calling Kazimiera's cell phone. It was only then that he discovered she'd left it at home and there was no way of getting in touch with her. The group waited between 15 and 30 minutes before leaving for the hotel. Later that evening, the tour guide went back to search for Kazimiera. The rest of the group allegedly weren't too concerned. The tour guide discovered the missing woman hadn't just gone to use the bathroom. She had purchased postcards from a souvenir shop and told the vendor that she needed to go to another store to purchase stamps. Police checked CCTV from the area when they began investigating the case. They discovered Kazimiera had returned to the parking lot shortly after the group left. She stayed in the lot until the evening, apparently waiting for someone to come back for her. At some time between 3 and 6 in the morning, Kazimiera was spotted at a gas station 6 kilometers from the chapel. The language barrier meant that the workers couldn't understand her and she left without help. Kazimiera apparently walked back to the chapel. She was seen on camera again, this time without her bag, hat, or coat. At one point, she tried to get help from a janitor, but he thought she was drunk and couldn't help her. Kazimiera hasn't been seen since. Her family traveled to Lithuania to do their own missing person search. Hospitals, homeless shelters, and care homes were searched, but there was no trace of Kazimiera. She remains a missing person and would be 89 years old if still alive. As one of the most haunted places in the United States, it's unsurprising that the Queen Mary is a ghost ship with many mysteries and creepy photos. The weird history of the old ship has allegedly left behind hundreds of spirits who haunt the Queen Mary. The ship's creepy history began almost 90 years ago when the Queen Mary set sail on its maiden voyage from Southampton, England, headed towards New York in 1936. It continued to serve as a luxury passenger ship for 3 years until the Second World War. Known during these times as the Grey Ghost, the ship stealthily transported over 800,000 US soldiers to different military theaters, up to 16,000 at a time. During these long voyages, many lives were lost due to harsh sailing conditions. Some even jumped overboard to escape the horrors of real life. Stories of multiple burials at sea were commonplace, though to keep the troop numbers secret from the enemy, no history of how many sailors lost their lives aboard the ship was ever recorded. One of the darkest and most disturbing stories in the history of the ship was when the Queen Mary cleaved in two an escort ship called the Curacao. 331 men out of 432 aboard the Curacao perished while the Queen Mary merely dented her bow, as shown in this photo. According to the creepy backstory, the ship could not stop to rescue anyone because they were in enemy waters and needed to keep moving. Another creepy story is that of a military cook said to have been thrown into the oven by a crew who was upset about what was on the menu. Though the scary urban legend made it into the Los Angeles Times in the 1980s, the paper had to admit that there was no actual evidence to prove the horror story had actually happened in real life. In 1947, the ship was retrofitted as a luxury passenger ship once again and resumed its Southampton to New York voyages for another 2 decades. During its time as a passenger ship, 47 more people lost their lives for various unknown reasons. According to many weird photographs that shouldn't exist, many of them are still on the haunted ghost ship. Of the countless spirits that apparently remain aboard the Queen Mary, the most famous is that of a little girl named Jackie, who haunts 2 swimming pools aboard the ship, often calling out for her missing mother. One of these haunted swimming pools is where some of the most mysterious photos were ever taken aboard the ghost ship. In 2001, a live webcam showed a dark figure running up the stairs near the pool. The entity was only present for a handful of frames before mysteriously disappearing, and the photographer managed to capture a photo of the creepy figure before it vanished without a trace. A few days later, another visitor witnessed the same thing and captured more creepy photos of a ghost. It's possible these creepy photos show Jackie, although the figure seems taller than a child. It might instead be another urban legend of a ghost known as the Lady in White, who sings to Jackie at times, or a figure known as Grumpy, who was also sometimes seen near Jackie. Another creepy photo was taken by a tourist on a late-night tour of the Queen Mary. She snapped 2 photos moments apart. One photo looks normal, and in another, taken moments later, a ghostly figure is caught on camera running up the stairs. They appear to be wearing a white gown and have dark hair. It's hard to make out in the poor lighting, but when zoomed in, there definitely seems to be something on the stairs, partially covered by the banister. Whatever, or whoever it was, wasn't in the first photo. Of all the photos, the creepiest was featured in the book Ghosts of the Queen Mary. Little is known about this photo other than it was provided by a woman named Priscilla. It appears to show a little girl stood on the balcony leading to the stairs, looking over the banister at the camera. The historic Queen Mary is now a luxury hotel and museum in Long Beach, California. The owners of the hotel originally tried to dismiss the scary stories of paranormal encounters. When it was obvious they couldn't stop the spread of the stories, the owners instead leaned into the haunted attraction, offering ghost tours and later a live stream of one of the most haunted areas of the ship. Whether or not any of these pictures have captured genuine paranormal activity, they still immortalize a piece of weird history. The Queen Mary has changed the minds of many skeptics, and with so many creepy stories that have emerged over the decades, this will likely remain one of the most haunted places on Earth. According to urban legends, the Edinburgh vaults under the city are quite haunted, and evidence of its weird history has been caught on camera across a number of mysterious photos. Edinburgh is a modern city built on top of centuries of ancient history. There's a weird underground network of vaults that contain dark secrets and scary mysteries that need solving. The most famous vaults reside under the South Side Bridge, which was built in 1788. These vaults were used by businesses to store their goods, but the vaults would frequently flood and businesses moved out, only to be replaced with common riffraff. The vaults soon became a hotbed for criminal activity. The disturbing history of the vaults includes it allegedly being a hunting ground for evil serial killers, Burke and Hare, who would sell bodies to the nearby university to use for medical research. By the 1860s, the vaults were cleared and filled with rubble to stop people moving back in, and they were long forgotten about. It wasn't until 1985 that this weird period of Edinburgh history was rediscovered, and paranormal stories began to spread. Today, the vaults are open to tourists to take photographs, though spirits like the Watcher, aka Mr. Boots, don't like visitors. A ghost in a long coat whose great height is further accentuated by tall boots. The Watcher's true identity remains a frightening mystery. Some stories place him as a slum landlord, Others believe a creepy backstory in which he is a protector of the spirit of a woman who's trapped in the vaults with him. A third explanation is that he once guarded the vaults from thieves. Loud footsteps often precede him, and his face has never been successfully described. The creepiest picture of the Watcher was taken by a tourist named Emma while she and her sister Lauren were visiting the vaults in 2015. Emma took lots of pictures, especially in the pitch-black areas where barely anything could be seen. Most of these images came back pitch black, but one of the weird photos caught Emma's attention. She adjusted the brightness of the image and discovered something sinister standing behind her sister. Lauren was looking through a door where a little light was coming through. In the original photo, a dark mass is barely visible behind her, blending into the darkness behind her. But when brightened, that mass takes the eerie form of a figure who appears to be facing away from Lauren, almost like he's walking away. And true to his nickname, Mr. Boots, which he reportedly hates, the long coat and boots are caught on camera. The women said they didn't feel the presence of anything paranormal at the time that the photo was taken, but it was definitely chilling to spot the figure afterwards. The creepy ghost doesn't appear in any of the photos taken before or after. A different photo taken by another tourist seems to show a dark hooded figure lurking towards the camera. His face is apparently covered by a mask or is otherwise distorted. If this creepy photo of an arm cloaked in black looks strange and mysterious, it's because the photo was taken at 30 East Drive, Pontefract, a supposedly haunted place in the UK with a weirdly dark and disturbing history. This ghost photo was taken by Claire Cowell at the end of a paranormal investigation at about 11 p.m. While getting a glass of water in the kitchen, she heard a noise from behind her and snapped a photo, not realizing a ghost had been caught in the background until later. The paranormal photo shows the end of the hallway leading to the stairs. A figure appears to be heading up the stairs with one arm stretched out behind them and poking out from behind the wall. In its hand is what appears to be a rosary. This is believed to be a picture of a ghost sighting that's come to be known as the Black Monk, a paranormal entity who's been sighted by the Pritchard family when they first moved into the house in 1966. During this time, marbles would drop from the ceiling, cupboards would shake, green ooze would come from a pipe, running footsteps were heard all the time, and framed family photos were being mysteriously slashed. Creepiest of all, a dark figure wearing black robes stood over them and then mysteriously disappeared. But unfortunately, no photographic evidence of these scary stories exists. Going back to the present, the same area where the ghost hunter Claire had her paranormal encounter was later investigated by another ghost hunter named Pete Bolton. In this photo, the lights are on in a hallway empty of people, but in the mirror, a figure can be seen standing on the stairs. It appears to have dark hair or a hood surrounding a pale face, and it's cloaked in a dark outfit. A third creepy photo has caught more possible paranormal activity on camera at a different part of the house. The Pritchards had a daughter named Diane, and one time a paranormal investigator named John Paul Newlands was taking photographs of a mirror in Diane's former bedroom. Caught on camera is a blurred figure that looks somewhat like someone wrapped in fabric made from distorted light. Some have argued this image was created by light being reflected in an unusual way, but Bill Bungay would point out that the strange fogs are one of the paranormal stories that many guests at 30 East Drive have told. Some believe that the Black Monk was an actual monk who lived in an abbey near the site in the 1500s. The monk took the lives of multiple people until he was thrown down a well just across the road from where 30 East Drive was built centuries later. Whatever the case may be, the creepy mystery behind the Black Monk, despite no shortage of photographic evidence, remains strangely unsolved. Today, Hampton Court Palace is as well known for its disturbing ghost photos as it is for its truly dark history. The palace was home to King Henry VIII, arguably England's most famous king. Unfortunately for those closest to Henry, what made him famous was his string of marriages. 3 of Henry's 3 wives passed away before he did. and all three are said to still haunt the Hampton Court Palace. This photo, taken in 2015, is one of the more recent creepy images that is said to have captured one of King Henry's queens. The weird photo was taken by a coach driver named Trevor Ty, who had brought a load of tourists to the palace and was now waiting to start the return journey. He went into the entrance hall to wait. Trevor waited until the hall was cleared of tourists before he took a historical photo. He didn't want anybody to ruin his shot. Later that day, Trevor looked again at the image and realized he'd caught the mysterious figure of a young woman dressed in white. She's either reading something on a sign in front of her or looking down at the entrance. And many believe Trevor caught the ghost of Queen Catherine Howard on camera, Henry's fifth wife who was accused of adultery. Some history stories place her running towards the chapel, screaming and begging King Henry VIII for mercy. But her screams never reached his ears before she was recaptured and later sentenced to a horrible end. As evidenced by this creepy photo, Catherine apparently has to relive these moments countless times as her ghost rushes down what's now known as the Haunted Gallery, sometimes screaming as she's dragged back by figures unseen. As a side note, in 1999, 2 guests mysteriously lost consciousness in the Haunted Gallery within an hour of each other. And scary stories like this are not uncommon. One ghost that is more commonly seen is that of Sybil Penn, described as the Grey Lady. She was a dedicated member of the staff for the Tudors. She worked as a wet nurse for Prince Edward and was nursing the future Queen of England Elizabeth I when she fell ill and did not pull through. It wasn't until 1829 that the Grey Lady was first spotted after the Hampton Church was renovated and her grave was disturbed, at which point she returned to haunt the Hampton Court Palace. It's believed the Grey Lady was captured in a disturbing photo taken by tourists in 2015, the same year as Queen Catherine's sighting. A dark figure seems to tower over the young woman as she wanders through the king's apartments. Another photo, taken a few moments later, shows no sign of the sinister-looking figure. Hampton Court Palace continues to attract thousands of visitors who are drawn in by a sense of dark history. Even those who didn't experience anything paranormal while visiting should carefully examine their photos just in case they've caught anything weird on camera that cannot be explained. With countless visitors going to the USS Yorktown every year, it's not surprising that many have caught pictures with unexplained details. But it was 2 photos taken during an investigation by South Carolina ETV that caught the strangest paranormal encounters ever taken on the ship. One was taken in the radar room by a visitor in 2008. The visitor snapped a photo through the door of the room and found the very faint see-through figure of a man in the photo. Half a torso, which is clearly wearing a long-sleeve shirt or jacket of some kind, can be seen in the image. It was taken through a window, so reflections cannot be ruled out. But the photographer pointed out that it was mid-August in South Carolina at the time. Temperatures were in the mid-80s, and he wasn't wearing a long-sleeve shirt in that weather. Many TV shows have also visited USS Yorktown as part of a paranormal investigation. They've caught unexplained sounds on camera and even voices on spirit boxes. But perhaps the most convincing evidence came from South Carolina ETV. During their investigation, a stationary camera was left in a hallway near the women's berthing area, a location that wasn't on any of the public tours of the time. The team left the camera rolling while they were elsewhere on the ship. Nobody else was aboard the USS Yorktown at the time. The camera picked up the unexplained sound of bangs and possibly footsteps, and at one point, a loud slapping sound that seemed to have been made very close to the camera's microphone. The 2 creepy photos taken during the investigation were taken by producer Mark Adams. Mark explained how they were using a laser pointer to project a grid pattern on a hallway near the women's sleep quarters, which wasn't on any of the public tours at the time. The grid was designed to make it easier to spot movements. The lights were all shut off, leaving only the eerie green dots lighting up the area. Mark decided to take 2 still photos, one in landscape and one in portrait. Due to the low lights, he did time exposure photos and braced the camera against a metal box on the wall to minimize any shaking from his hands. When he looked back at the two photos, he noticed some striking differences. The end of the hallway was completely black in the first photo, but in the second one, taken moments later, the lights around the black mass were blurred, as if they were in movement. When the brightness was increased and the contrast decreased, the clear outline of a figure could be seen at the end of the hall in the first photo. In the second photo, what looks like a leg can be seen sticking out of the door, as if somebody had just walked through. An EMF reader also appeared to be lit up during the second photo. If you believe the team when they say there was nobody else in the area when the photos were taken, then these creepy images cannot be explained. Police in Tampa, Florida have released images of a suspect that they're desperately looking for since he was involved in an armed robbery that took place on the 4th of August, 2024, before fleeing the area. At about 7:30 p.m. that day, the man in question walked into a Little Caesars Pizza restaurant and approached one of the counters. He then produced a firearm and threatened two of the restaurant's employees, demanding that they hand over any money they had in their registers or risk being harmed. The incident obviously took the two employees by surprise, but luckily they had their wits about them, and they decided that rather than hand over any cash, it would be better to flee since there was no guarantee that they wouldn't be harmed once the money was in the hands of the robber. They both ran to the back of the store, leaving the culprit to his own devices, but he seemingly refused to leave empty-handed and devised a different plan. He made his way to the restaurant's safe, where he attempted to open it, but not having the code or any other means to break it open, he was unsuccessful. Realizing that he was running out of time, he decided to leave before the police were informed. He was then captured by CCTV security cameras as he left the store and got into a white pickup truck with a dark-colored hood. He then left the scene empty-handed, but is still being sought by investigators since he threatened the restaurant's employees with a firearm and intended to commit a robbery, which is a very serious offense, even if he wasn't successful. After reviewing the security footage, investigators believe the truck in question is a mid-2000s Nissan Frontier with a black hood and aftermarket rims. They've asked members of the public to contact them if they spot the truck, and have warned that the man is not to be approached since he's likely still armed and may retaliate in order to keep avoiding the law. The robber is described as a Hispanic male who weighs around 220 pounds and has a very discernible potbelly. At the time of the robbery, he was wearing a dark-colored sweatshirt, jeans, and white shoes, thought to be tennis shoes. Unfortunately, neither of the employees got a good look at the man's face, since he was wearing a mask that covered most of it. But they feel that someone in the area likely knows the man, and they've asked anyone who recognizes him to come forward. If you or anyone you know has information on the case, you're asked to contact the Tampa Police Department at 813-231-6130. The Gwinnett Police Department is currently investigating what they call one of the most disturbing cases they've ever come across. While the murder of 60-year-old Kay Winnell happened more than 16 years ago, no one has been charged with the crime despite several clues being found. At the time, Kay was married to Hal Winnell, a multi-millionaire real estate developer, and the couple lived in Lawrenceville, Georgia. Hal was a very successful man at his job, and so he and Kay were known to live a glamorous lifestyle. But on that day, Kay had fallen ill. She decided to stay home to recover, and Hal set out to his job as normal. But when he returned home later that day, he'd be faced with a scene out of his worst nightmares. Upon entering the home, he found Kay lying on the ground in the kitchen, and it was immediately obvious that she'd been brutally attacked. The kitchen was covered in biological material, and Hal knew that she was no longer alive. He called the police, who upon their arrival confirmed this, and they immediately started processing the scene. They quickly deduced that there was no sign of forced entry, which immediately brought Hal's innocence into question. But he stated that he had an alibi, and it was checked and confirmed. Hence, he was quickly ruled out as a suspect, which led investigators to believe that Kay knew her attacker. They also believed that the culprit knew she was home alone that day, and seized this opportunity to enact their plan, likely being led into the house by an unsuspecting Kay. Biological material was found in front of a set of stairs in the house, which suggested that Kay was attacked as soon as she opened the front door. Her glasses were found a few feet away from there, making it likely that they were dislodged from her face by this initial attack. It's believed that she then tried to run from her assailant, who chased her through the hallway and into the kitchen. Here, he caught up with her and attacked her with a small sharpened blade, such as a scalpel, ending her life. The weapon has never been found, but thanks to evidence on Kay's body, it's known that it was extremely sharp. Several pieces of latex gloves were also found at the scene, and since they didn't match any of the gloves worn by paramedics or other first responders, it's believed they were worn by the killer, which explains why no foreign fingerprints were found in the house. Kay's wallet and credit cards were still in the house, as were several pieces of expensive jewelry, which proves that this was a targeted attack and not a crime of opportunity such as robbery. Neighbors were interviewed, but no one saw the attacker enter the couple's home, though one neighbor did report seeing a man with wire-rimmed glasses walking around the neighborhood twice in the days leading up to the attack. When a composite sketch of this man was created, it was found to closely resemble a man who Kay had her picture taken with in Las Vegas years before, but his identity remains unknown. Then the case got even stranger. A local newspaper received a letter in which the author claimed that Kay was unhappy in her marriage and that she and the author were supposed to be together, but that she eventually decided to stay with her husband. In the letter, Kay is referred to as money grubbing and her family as white trash. While many people believe that this points to Kay having had an affair, some investigators think this is merely a tactic to throw them off the killer's trail, since no evidence has been found to suggest that she or Hal were unfaithful. It's been suggested that Kay lived some kind of second life though, but it's almost certain that Hal knew about it. When the case went cold, Hal hired a private detective in an effort to find more evidence, but he passed away from a heart attack in June of 2010, and hence that part of the investigation came to an end. This case remains open, and anyone who has any helpful information is urged to contact the Gwinnett County Criminal Investigation Division's anonymous tip line at 1770-513-5390. On the 8th of October, 2024, Philadelphia police officers were called to an incident that took place on 57th Street and Larchwood Avenue on the Cobbs Creek part of the city, and when they arrived there, they were shocked to learn what had happened. They told investigators that they were aboard a SEPTA bus when a man opened fire on the vehicle, seemingly after a minor altercation with the driver, but by all accounts, the argument in no way warranted the use of force. 3 women who were aboard the bus, aged 29, 56, and 60 respectively, sustained injuries from the attack, but they were all taken to a nearby hospital and after receiving treatment were predicted to make full recoveries, since none of the injuries were life-threatening. The driver of the bus told the police that 3 young men boarded the bus at 19th Street and Oregon Avenue at about 4:30, but didn't have the fare that they needed. This resulted in a minor argument between the driver and the 3 men, but the driver seemingly wasn't interested in carrying on the conversation and let the group on without paying. This should have all ended the incident, since the men weren't forced off the bus and the police weren't called. But this made very little difference to one of the men, who decided to take the matter further, despite the driver showing patience and understanding. The bus continued on to 57th and Catherine Streets, where the 3 got off at a bus stop. But as soon as they did so, one of the men produced a firearm and blindly fired 3 rounds at the bus, injuring the 3 passengers in the process. One uninjured passenger called Tori stated that people on the bus feared for their lives and yelled for the driver to stop the vehicle, but he continued driving and feared that the men would open fire once more. She added that at one point during the attack, she was certain that she would lose her life, but luckily the driver was able to speed away, avoiding further injuries. Other passengers stated that it was a miracle that only 3 people were harmed, since there were more than 50 people on board. Once the bus was safely out of reach of the attacker, the passengers were able to disembark and find safety, after which the police were called. At the time, it wasn't clear whether the attack was prompted by the earlier altercation, but since no other motive could be found, it's believed that the man was irritated by the bus driver asking for money. Luckily, when the bus's security cameras were checked, investigators were able to find clear images of the group, and more importantly, of the man who fired the weapon. These images were made available to the public, and he was quickly identified as 18-year-old Rafael Ezemaka. They added that he's known to frequent the Southwest, West, and South Philadelphia areas, and have asked that anyone who spots him contact the Philadelphia Police Department at 215-686-8477. A reward of $5,000 is being offered to anyone who comes forward with information, leading to Raphael being tracked down and arrested. In May of 2004, 53-year-old Oki Kite, known to his friends as Al, was working for Carter Douglas, an engineering consulting firm in Denver, Colorado. On the 24th of that month, Al was supposed to work a shift, but he failed to show up, and his coworkers became concerned since he was known to be very punctual and would have let his manager know if he was unable to come in. They assumed he was sick and had decided to stay home, but they called his house to make sure that he was okay. But they got no answer on his landline, and calls to his cell phone had the same result. In his employee file, Al had listed his sister Barbara as his emergency contact. She lived in Virginia and answered the call, only to reveal that she hadn't heard from her brother at all that day. She then also tried to contact him, but to no avail. Something about Al's silence perturbed everyone involved, and so Barbara decided to contact the police. She requested that they perform a welfare check and provided them with all the details up to this point. It wouldn't be until later in the day that this was done, but when officers knocked on Al's door, they got no answer. Having learned that his absence was very out of character, they made the decision to enter the house, since there were real concerns for his well-being. They walked through the house calling for Al, but got no answer. During the initial search, they found no signs that anything was wrong. But that all changed when they decided to check the house's basement. There, they found Al deceased in a crime scene that was described by one detective as the worst he had ever witnessed. It was concluded that Al had been attacked from behind as he was descending the stairs into the basement. He had been tied up and ultimately attacked with a sharpened blade, resulting in his life being ended. A further search of the house revealed that his attacker then took a shower, ate some food from the kitchen, slept in his bed, and then stole some of his clothes before leaving the house. But before doing so, the culprit had made sure to wipe down all the surfaces to get rid of fingerprints, and they'd poured bleach down the shower's drain to destroy any DNA evidence that may have been left there. It was discovered that Al's cell phone and car were missing, and it was theorized that this was a well-planned robbery. The car was later found that same day, a little more than a block from the house, and inside they found several ATM receipts. They noticed that a transaction had been made at a nearby Wells Fargo ATM, and upon checking security footage, they were able to see the man who had used Al's card, though it only showed a small portion of his face which was covered. He was also wearing gloves, so no fingerprints were present. The attacker then drove Al's vehicle to the spot where it was found, after which he returned to the house, filled the kitchen sink with bleach, and threw the keys, as well as several sharpened blades, into the liquid to destroy evidence. Back at the house, investigators found a rental application in the kitchen trash can. It contained the name Robert Cooper, but the address that was written down was for a building on the University of Colorado's medical school campus. The social security number was found to belong to a woman who'd never heard of Al, and when Al's phone was traced, it was located in the 5 Points area where it had been left and picked up by a homeless person. It was later revealed that Al was in the process of renting out his basement, and it's likely that his attacker feigned interest in moving in. It's thought that he attacked Al as he was helping the man move a recliner into the basement, though this remains mere speculation. Al's neighbor had seen the man at the house before, likely when he was being shown the basement, but stated that he didn't respond when the man called out to him. Investigators believe that this isn't the first time that the man has ended someone's life, and that he may be a serial killer. The man who calls himself Robert Cooper has still not been identified, and anyone who has information on his identity is asked to contact the Aurora Police Department at 303-739-6710. Being abducted must be one of the most frightening experiences imaginable. In some cases, kidnapping victims are released once a ransom amount has been paid, but in many others, the abducted person is never seen again and their fate remains unknown. One such an incident took place on the 2nd of April, 2024 in Auckland, New Zealand. Late that night, neighbors of a woman who lives in the Beach Haven area became aware of a commotion at her residence. They became alarmed when they heard what sounded like a firearm being discharged, especially since they were aware that the woman lived with a caregiver and would likely not be able to protect herself in the event of an attack. They immediately called the police, who rushed to the scene, but were told by the woman's caregiver that she was no longer there. She described how 3 people, 2 men and a woman, barged into the house and started attacking the woman before dragging her out of the house and forcing her into a car before fleeing. She added that she knew one of the men, who according to her was obsessed with the victim, despite having never been in a romantic relationship with her. She told investigators that the group ran into the woman's bedroom while she was asleep and, brandishing a large firearm, forced her to leave the house before abducting her. She gave a description of the vehicle that was used, but despite using helicopters to search from the air, it was never located. But they soon received a call from someone in the Greenhithe area who'd found the woman who had suffered injuries to her eye, foot, and spine. She was taken to North Shore Hospital, where she received treatment and was said to be in stable condition. Thanks to the statement made by the woman's caregiver, investigators were able to ascertain that one of the attackers was a 25-year-old man called Ralph Park. A photo of his face was made available to the public, who were asked to keep a lookout for Park, who's thought to have suffered a wound during the altercation, having either accidentally discharged his weapon or being accidentally fired upon by one of his co-abductors. Hence, they were keeping a close eye on hospitals and other healthcare facilities in case Park decided to look for treatment. It should also be noted that he's likely using a false name to evade the law, and that he should not be approached if he's spotted, since he's possibly still armed. Park's 2 accomplices have been tracked down and taken into custody, but Park has managed to evade capture up to this point. The woman has also been charged with possession of an illegal substance and failing to carry out police obligations. If you see Park or know where he may be hiding out, you're asked to dial 111 or contact Crime Stoppers, who can be reached at 0800-555-111. Fraud is a heinous crime that sees a criminal attempt to line their pockets with other people's money, usually by pretending to be someone else or by forging documentation in such a way that they receive money meant for someone else. This can take the form of forging checks in someone else's name, altering someone's will without their knowledge, or using someone's credit card without their permission. It's a common crime that often goes unnoticed until it's too late, meaning that the culprit has had plenty of time to flee or go into hiding. No industry is safe from fraudsters, as they've been known to target Medicare funds, payrolls, mortgage companies, insurance businesses, and even financial institutions, such as one woman who's wanted for defrauding a currency exchange company in Newton on the 18th of March 2023, which is located in Surrey, British Columbia in Canada. According to staff at the currency exchange, the woman walked into the building, which is located in the 8000 block of 128th Street, and produced her identification along with 2 bank drafts that she then cashed. It was only later on that staff noticed something strange about the transactions, and upon further investigation, they realized that the bank drafts were issued in the name of someone who looked nothing like the woman, who was captured by the building's security cameras. The Surrey Royal Canadian Mounted Police were contacted, and they were able to determine that the woman had somehow gotten a hold of someone else's ID and then used it to cash the bank drafts, which totaled to $237,000. In a photo that was taken from security footage and released to the public, the woman's face is clearly visible. She has long, dark hair, is wearing a dark jacket with what looks like a gray shirt underneath, and wears dark-rimmed glasses. Thanks to a description that was given by staff members, it was determined that she's South Asian, stands 5 foot 7 inches tall, and speaks several languages, including English and Hindi. More than a year later, the woman's true identity remains unknown, and investigators have asked anyone with information on the case to contact the Surrey RCMP at 604-599-0502. In 2016, Jennifer Cohen, a 35-year-old woman from Bay Ridge in Brooklyn, New York, was living a tough life. She had 2 children and a family that cared for her well-being, but she'd been struggling with illegal substances, and by September of that year, she'd been living on the streets for several days. She'd had several run-ins with the law, having been arrested on 24 separate occasions, though most of the charges were small ones that included possession of illegal substances and petty larceny. Her grandfather, Harry Lavin, stated that he tried to convince Jennifer to stay off the streets since they can be very dangerous, but his warnings fell on deaf ears, and she was last known to have been arrested on the 26th of September of that year. But on this occasion, she was almost immediately let go, something her family wished had never happened since she would lose her life shortly afterward. On the 4th of October, Jennifer's brother, Andrew Lavin, got a call from one of Jennifer's friends who stated that she was concerned about her since she hadn't heard from her for about a week. They usually spoke every day, and since she was unable to locate her, she wanted to find out if Andrew had seen her, but he hadn't. She then informed him that someone had lost their life at the Owl's Head skate park, and Andrew immediately started to worry that it was his sister. He would later have his worst fears realized when it was revealed that it was indeed Jennifer who passed away. But rather than the expected cause, illegal substances being responsible for ending her life, it was discovered that she'd been attacked at the skate park by an unknown assailant. When people in the area were interviewed, they reported that Jennifer was last seen in the company of a strange man whom nobody in the area recognized. CCTV security footage of the area was checked, and it revealed that Jennifer was walking with this same man on 2nd Avenue, just hours before the attack took place. It was noted that the man had a very distinctive way of walking, and investigators were certain that he would be identified quickly. But this wasn't the case, despite photos from the footage being made available to the public. His movements prior to the attack were traced via security footage, and it was revealed that he walked along 79th Street and 3rd Avenue before walking a mile to 56th Street. He then walked back to 59th Street and 2nd Avenue, where he and Jennifer met up before walking to the skate park where the attack took place. They arrived at the park at around 2:40 a.m. and remained there for about an hour before the man was seen leaving on his own. Investigators noted that he didn't seem panicked or perturbed in any way, which they take as a serious warning sign. Later that morning, a jogger was passing through the skate park when he found Jennifer and he contacted the police, but it was too late as she had already passed away. It's believed that her attacker is very familiar with the area and may have been working or living in the Bay Ridge area at the time, though he may have fled that area by now, having learned that he's wanted by the police and that he was captured by security cameras. Despite the man's image being made public, he's not been identified, and investigators are asking that anyone who recognizes him or knows who he is contact them immediately. In the footage, he's seen wearing a black jacket with white trim, dark-colored shoes, a dark baseball hat, and black shorts, also with white trim. He was also carrying a black backpack on his back. Anyone with information on Jennifer's attacker or his whereabouts can contact Crime Stoppers at 1-800-577-8477. A $10,000 reward is being offered for information leading to his arrest. Usually, when a crime is committed, investigators are summoned by the victim or someone who witnessed the incident, and an investigation can then be built from there. They'll ask the victim whether they knew the culprit and why the crime was committed, and with these details, the case is usually resolved quickly. But one kidnapping case that took place in Honolulu, Hawaii, in July of 2024 was the exception to this rule. Investigators knew a crime had been committed since it was reported by a witness who'd captured the incident on their cell phone camera. But they had no luck in identifying either the abductors or the victim, since no one recognized the person who was kidnapped. All they had to go on was the cell phone footage, which was used to create a timeline of the events that transpired on the 7th of July. They found that early that morning, the victim drove into the parking lot of a shopping center in Hilo. The man was driving a silver Honda Accord and parked his car facing Kinoalewa Avenue. Just a short while after he arrived, 3 men drove up in a white early 2000s model Toyota Tundra crew cab pickup truck. They drove behind the victim's car and parked their car there, ensuring that he was unable to drive away. By this time, the victim had exited his car, and 3 men approached him before suddenly assaulting him, seemingly without any provocation. They then forced him into the back seat of their truck before speeding away from the scene. The footage of the incident was thoroughly checked, but the men remained unidentified. But investigators were able to discern that 2 of the abductors were wearing black long-sleeved hoodies and shorts, while the third was wearing a black t-shirt also with shorts. Images from the footage were made available in case someone may recognize either the victim or his attackers, but no one came forward. The victim's car was processed, but he hadn't registered the vehicle, and hence his identity remained unknown. But investigators revealed that the victim was found the next day, and added that he was in good health, but the investigation had ground to a halt since the man, whose name has not been made public, refused to give any information on his attackers, likely because he feared for his safety. No further clues have been found since, and the three men remain on the run. Honolulu police have asked that anyone who recognizes any of the men in the footage, or who knows where they can be located, contact them at 808-961-2375. The case of the disappearance of 30-year-old Hana Kobayashi, who hails from Oahu in Hawaii, is one that contains a lot of strange details, and her family feels that she may be the victim of foul play. According to Hana's family, she had planned to travel from Maui to New York in November of 2024, and she'd be accompanied by her then boyfriend. She had planned to visit her aunt while there and told her family that she was looking forward to exploring the city's art scene, since she had aspirations of becoming a professional photographer. But shortly before the scheduled trip, Hana and her boyfriend's relationship ran into trouble and they broke up. Hana tried to get the plane tickets refunded, but was unable to do so. She and her ex then decided to go through with the flight, but agreed that they would go their separate ways once they landed in New York. They both boarded the plane in Maui and traveled to Los Angeles, where they were supposed to catch a connecting flight. Her ex boarded that flight, but Hana either missed it or ran into some kind of trouble, as she never boarded the plane and never made it to New York. She's been missing ever since and has not been seen or heard from since the 11th of November. They then recalled a series of texts that were sent from Hana's phone in the days leading up to her disappearance. They noticed that the messages contained words like hun, love, and babe, which were not in Hana's normal texting style. Then they received an even more disturbing text. Hana, or someone pretending to be her, stated that deep hackers had wiped her identity and stolen all of her money. A friend reported that they'd received a text that read, quote, "I got tricked pretty much into giving away all my funds for someone I thought I loved." The last message that her family received stated that she was feeling scared and that someone was trying to steal her money and identity. This was the last time that they heard from her, and her family, as well as investigators, are growing increasingly concerned for her safety. They believe that she may have been abducted after landing in Los Angeles and that she may have been trafficked, though this remains just a theory at this point. Security footage from a metro train station in Los Angeles shows Hana walking with an unidentified person on the 11th of November, and her family stated that in the footage, she seems to be worse for wear. Witnesses added that they saw Hana in a Taschen bookstore on the 9th of November. The store is located in the Grove Shopping Center in Los Angeles, but her family can't explain why she would have been there. That same day, she sent a Venmo payment to 2 different people, neither of whom is known to Hana's family. On the 10th, a video posted to Facebook showed Hana in attendance at the LeBron 22 trial experience, an event that took place at the same center in the Nike store. Witnesses who interacted with Hana in Los Angeles all stated that she seemed to be in good spirits, and on one occasion she told someone in the bookstore that she had some time to explore the LA area. This struck investigators as strange, since she only had a 40-minute layover at LAX before her flight to New York departed. In fact, she was so anxious to get to New York that she attempted to get a direct flight there, rather than wait for her connecting flight, but was unsuccessful. Hana's father, Ryan, traveled to Los Angeles to search for her, but he was found deceased in a parking lot close to LAX, seemingly having ended his own life. With no further leads being found, the FBI has joined the investigation, and inquiries are still ongoing. While images of the person seen with Hana have not been released, investigators have published photos of her at LAX on her own. If you or anyone you know may have seen Hana, or may have information on where she may be, you're urged to call the RID Movement hotline at 619-904-0840. Some homicide cases are entirely preventable, as is the case in the murder of 24-year-old Harshita Barela, who hailed from Corby in Northamptonshire, England. Harshita was married to 23-year-old Pankaj Lamba, but the arranged marriage was far from a happy one. The couple only tied the knot in August of 2023, but by September of 2024, the relationship had soured badly. On the 3rd of September, Harshita was granted a domestic violence protection order against her husband, who was told that he was not allowed to harass, pester, or intimidate her, as he had done in the months prior. Pankaj was taken into custody on domestic violence charges, but was eventually ordered to pay £480 in court costs, and he was released on bail. A decision that unfortunately sealed Harshida's fate, since she was much safer while he was in custody. On the 10th of November, she contacted her family in India by phone and stated that the protection order had expired. She added that she was at home and waiting for Pankaj to arrive, since she'd already cooked dinner. This was the last time that they heard from her. Harshida's phone was inexplicably turned off after that call and remained off for the next 2 days. When her family repeatedly failed to make contact with her, they decided to contact the police, since they all felt something wasn't right. On the 13th of November, they filed a missing person report with the Northamptonshire police and told them that they'd been unable to make contact with her in England, and that they were concerned for her safety, since she and her husband had not been getting along in recent times. Officers traveled to the couple's home to perform a welfare check on the 13th of November, but no one was home, and the missing person investigation continued. The next day, investigators were shocked to find Harshida deceased in the trunk of a car that had been parked on Brisbane Road in Ilford, which is more than 100 miles from the couple's home. An autopsy revealed that her life had been ended via strangulation, and Pankaj was immediately named as a person of interest, though it was immediately suspected that he'd already fled the country, likely relocating back to India. Pankaj's photo was made public, along with an image of the car that he drove from Corby to Ilford on the 11th of November, after allegedly ending his wife's life. On the 21st of November, CCTV images were released showing the couple walking along the boating lake in Corby on the 10th of November. It's believed that he ended her life that same night. Following this, searches of the area were conducted, but Pankaj could not be located. Investigators appealed to anyone who was driving or walking in that area between 1800 and 2100 that night to come forward, but no further leads were received. It's since been revealed that while the protection order against Pankaj was in effect, Harshida was placed in a refuge and repeatedly visited by officers, but when the order finally expired, she returned to their home. CCTV images were also released showing Pankaj in the Ilford area, likely after he had abandoned the car with Harshida in the trunk. They've asked that anyone who spoke to him or interacted with him in any way come forward, since they may have valuable information concerning the case. If you've spotted Pankaj or know where he is, you're asked to contact your local police department or dial 999 to report any useful information. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked this video, be sure to hit that like button. Also, don't forget to subscribe and click that notification bell to keep up to date with all of our future uploads. But my name is Ty Knotts, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.